Hello everybody, my name's Andrew. I'm a managing broker here at my home group. I've been here since 2012, and in the last couple of years I've kind of transitioned from buyer agent mostly to I've done mostly listings with working with investors. So coming with that comes with huge responsibility to learn how to comp properly, and not only comp for today but comp 4 months from today, you know, when the property is going to be ready, all those things. So I have a couple, like this is one that we just did. We just closed it in May. So if I'm going too fast, any questions? Like I'm just going to show you basically how I look at comps. I'm not an appraiser, so just full disclosure. It's full comps like an appraiser. I'm not an appraiser. I've met with a ton of, I go to every appraisal on my listings. I talk to every appraiser. I put a comp book together, a full property book with pictures, the comps that I use, the comps that I'm projecting, and I found that it works well to meet with the appraiser. I don't know if anybody else does that, but I do that. I try to do that on every single listing, to meet with them, talk to them. Yes?
When you meet with the appraiser, because I do too, but how short or long do you make that, and what do you cover?
Basically, I go over my comp book. I just tell them, like, here's what we did. If it's a traditional listing, I'll tell them here's what the improvements are. Here's what I used to comp the property. Here's recent closings. Here's recent activity. Any other contracts that I've had, if we have multiple offers, any kind of anything pertinent that I have to bring to the table, and then I leave. I just say, okay, I'll leave it to your job.
Actually go over it with them and you don't just give it to them. Okay.
If I try to make every effort to meet an appraiser. Sometimes they make it their job to not meet with you. Like they make it so that like the time is just like ridiculous. Like 8:30 on a Sunday. I'm like, dude, come on. Like I gave you 6 times and you picked a Sunday morning at 8. So I don't know if that's just their, I don't know. Some appraisers are nice, some appraisers aren't. Just like everybody else. It just depends on who you get the day. I've found that it could be you just got a bad appraiser on a bad day. Maybe you got to fight last night with his wife. Like I've had that happen where like the number came and you're just like, what the heck was that? Like I just did a refi for a personal property, investment property, and we refied it in January and it got 518 on the appraisal. What has happened since January to now? Appreciation, no inventory, natural buyer. The next guy appraised it for $30,000 less. And I was like, and I gave him the other appraisal. We gave him the appraisal. Like, here's the appraisal. Like, this should be a slam dunk. The property next door sold for like $70,000 more than ours did. It's bigger, obviously, but still, like natural appreciation has happened in the last 6 months that you would think would be an easy sale, but apparently we got a guy who had a personal vendetta against us for some reason. I don't know what the deal was, but it was. Even the lender said this was like personal. It had to be personal because there's no reason. The guy actually used a vacant lot to comp a house. It was one of our 6 comps. Like, how are you going to use a vacant lot to comp a house? Like, just completely ridiculous. But again,
what was the recourse on that?
Well, we asked him to go back and redo it, and he said no, flat out no. Not going to do it. No. We did, but the lender we were trying to get 20% or 25% LTV to lower interest rate. The lender just ended up paying for it instead of fighting it. Yeah, so it was pretty ridiculous, So if that had been a traditional sale, that deal was dead, and there was nothing anybody could have done to fix it. And for no other reason than the appraiser came in and said, "This is what I'm going to do today," and no real supporting comps, no real value, no real reason why, kind of out of left field. And we did everything that we would normally do: provide the comps, provide the value, provide improvement lists, provide dollar amounts for the improvement list. And just for whatever reason, the guy decided that day he was not gonna support our value and was not gonna help us out. So no real rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes you got to remember, though. I mean, I'm saying comp like an appraiser. An appraisal is a specific value of an opinion on that specific day and time by one person. It has no bearing unless it's FHA. Sometimes VA, it'll stick to it, but if it's a conventional loan, no, it's not material. You don't have to share the value. You don't have to provide the value. It's what it was that day. Does not mean it's going to be the same tomorrow. So it just goes away. So it's kind of it's interesting, and it's hard to explain that to our sellers or our buyers even. Like, that appraisal is not a material fact. So if it fell through for appraisal last time, that doesn't, they have no need to share that value with us because it's just an opinion. It has no bearing on what moving forward should be, could be, will be. So it's, you know, we provided the guy the appraisal, but he obviously thought the same thing, even though the market conditions you would think would prove otherwise, but that's not what happened that day. So this is a property that one of my investors had looked at. We had done more in this area before. We had done one a couple years ago. So basically it's 1,250 square feet. If you know the area, this is 12th Street in Northern. It's north of Northern. And if you know that area, once you cross Northern on 12th Street or anywhere in that central corridor, values tend to drop. So we had this property flagged that came up. It was a multiple offer scenario. And we knew, because we had sold something very similar about 18 months prior, that we got 285 on it. So it had been 18 months prior. This is a little smaller than that one, but we figured we could get 299.5. And that's what we listed for, and that's exactly what we got. So how I came to that. So basically, the first thing I do when I pull comps is I'll pull up Monsoon just to see what is going on in the neighborhood. Because if the neighborhood is showing everything's selling for $250 no matter what, then obviously our evaluation is going to be wrong, so there's no need to proceed further. There's no need to pull comps. But that wasn't the case. I mean, that was the case here, which was a little surprising, but we knew that we had some information because we had sold on this, I think it was this one. We sold this one a couple years ago. So basically what I do is I know this is 1,200 square feet. And the first thing I'll do is I'll run a comparables just to see. And so it gives you, what this does is it just gives you a very quick 30,000 mile view. It has nothing to do with anything except for price per square foot and fair cash value. I don't use the fair cash value ratio. I just find that that's not really a representative of what people will pay for a property. That's more of I would say people use that for lending and maybe insurance and stuff like that, but not for consumer based. So price per square foot. So even now, you know, 3 months later, it's telling me the price per square foot is $246 average. So okay, we got a little bit better. $335 is the high. Now, do you guys rely 100% on price per square foot? Like, do you think that that's the end all be all for?
No.
I use it as a guide, but I don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because all the price per square foot tells you is it's a range of values, right? Because what's specific about that property could be different than what's specific about your property. Now, if the neighborhood, everything in the neighborhood is selling around $200 a square foot, do you think you can go to $300 a square foot? Probably not. It would have to be, I mean, even if you did the most over-the-top remodel in the world, you're probably not going to get that number, but it's just a guide. It's a baseline. It's something to start with. You look at the neighborhood next to you. This is the reason I picked this neighborhood is because it's not track. It's not cookie cutter. This house is not like the house next door, because that's pretty fairly easy to comp. I mean, if you have a subdivision, there's usually with builders, there's 3 different levels. There's the entry level, mid level, and the high level, right? And as long as you stay within that area, you can probably comp it out pretty quickly because they're all the same plans, they have the same features, same lot sizes, same year built. Everything's pretty similar. So it's pretty. If you look at a house next door that's sold for $335 and you have the same model, I mean, unless time has passed, it's probably going to go for around $335, just based on that number. It's not obviously not a guide. It's not. There's no. The thing about comps is there's no. It's an art. It's not a science. Like there's an art to it because you have to. Because at the end of the day, it's what someone's willing to pay. It's not has nothing to do. And that's just full disclosure. My biggest beef and thing with this industry in particular, especially appraisal, is they're looking at 6 months prior. They're not taking, very rarely do they consider current market conditions. They'll give an adjustment for it, but they don't put it into consideration, and then they don't project. Like, I would say that because of the market conditions right now, with less than 2 months of inventory, that you would think price appreciation would be naturally happening. That doesn't seem to be the case. It's not following suit with what you would think general economics would say would be happening. And why is that? You know, a lot of reasons. Economy, people are worried, blah blah blah. Like, I'm not going to get into all that, but it's just not an indication. So why in the world would you, if something sold 6 months ago, why would you put so much weight on what something's worth today? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It never has, it never will, but that's the way they do it.
Do they actually go in the property, or they just use this
Who's that?
data?
The appraisers?
Appraisers?
They always
They
go in the
do
property,
always
have
go
to
in
take
there?
pictures, have to measure, and depending on what type of financing you have, it might be a little bit more in depth than that. If it's FHA, they're going to put their head up in the attic, check. FHA could ask for repairs. VA could do the same thing. You know.
Missouri, you don't. You can do drive-bys and they can just use data.
Why and when someone does a drive-by appraisal, I don't have any idea what triggers that in the system. Sometimes it's an underwriter thing that triggers that. Sometimes it's the appraisal. The appraiser decides that the value is so far ahead of what the actual loan amount is, he doesn't need to go in. I don't know. I'm not like I said, I'm not an appraiser, so I don't know the answer to that. But you would think, I've had appraisals come in, you know, where the guy's putting 30-40% down, nowhere near the loan amount, but it comes off by he appraises the loan by $5,000, like, which doesn't make makes zero sense to me. Like, how can you decide something's worth that minuscule amount less than what the contract is? Doesn't make any sense. So,
Can I just,
yes.
so even though they do come inside your house, they drive the neighborhood, they don't go inside the others?
No.
Yeah.
That's why you have to you have to provide them with the best comps that you can, the best things that you can find related to that property. Like, I rarely put properties that are lower, obviously, because I have an agenda. I'm trying to get my higher value. So, but if that's all you got, that's all you got. I mean, you make a case for why it's better than that one. So I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe if there was an appraiser here, you could tell you why that sometimes they'll do drive-bys and sometimes they'll go in and sometimes they'll do more work than. I guess it just depends on everybody. It's just a person who goes through. It just depends on the person you get that day. It's really, again, it's one of the most frustrating things that I've found about this industry is it's just there's no. If you ask 5 appraisers what the value is going to be on a pool, you'll get 5 different answers. You know, and to me that's ridiculous. Like, how do you not have a step? Like, I get it because if it's in North Scottsdale on a $2 million property, that pool is going to be worth more than if you're in Central Phoenix on a $500,000 property. I get it, but like, there's no set standard. Like, how much is a garage worth? I don't know, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. I don't know. How much is owned solar worth? Depends on the kilowatt size. But again, like, I can have 13 kilowatts in my house owned. That's someone says is worth 8, and the next guy can say it's worth 15. There's no reason to it. So you have to factor that into when you're comping properties. There's going to be variation that you can't control because it's a person. It's a person, and you don't know who taught them, what their value, what they think that day. It's very frustrating. Yes, sir.
So I know you guys put together those books for your appraisers, and I started doing that as well. That's bit me in the ass a couple times. How often do you find just appraisers are like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I don't need you to tell me how to do my job. And
I've only on this one last time on it was our personal property has it ever really seemed to affect. Usually, I've found that they've been pretty appreciative of the effort. Because it's a pretty thick book. It's like a full-on binder of stuff, and I took the time to print it out. It's all in color. It's nice. It's well put together, and I've never had anybody. They always take it if I'm not there. They always take it, and they're always appreciative of it. And I haven't had a problem. Usually on these flips, we're pushing value to the max. Like, we're pushing it to the best you can get at a neighborhood. And I think once out of the last few years have I missed. And not saying I'm the greatest, but I haven't seen it be negative. I haven't seen it go negative on me. So I think they appreciate the effort. They appreciate that I'm trying to do my job. Like that's my job, is to sell the house and provide support for why I sold it at that price. But so that's, I don't know. I don't know. It just depends on the person.
Yeah, I'm same with me. I've only had one that was like, hey, I know what I'm doing.
I get that a lot, though. I get
Like
that.
you're trying to influence me, or
I mean, the first conversations generally, of course you are. I mean, it'd be stupid to think you wouldn't. I mean, you do have an agenda. Your job is to sell the house and protect your client's interests. It's just, so to think that you're an impartial person, impartial party is ridiculous. You're not. You're tied to that property.
I
So,
just want to be careful about that, because
of course,
you're
you're,
not allowed to do that.
well, but you're trying to support a contract price, which is your
Right.
job. You're not trying to influence him to think, like if there's no way in heck that price should be there, and you got a crazy number by some buyer who didn't know what the heck they were doing, and you're trying to influence them that way, sure, there's a problem. But if you're within the range of what it should be, and you're priced appropriately, then I don't have any problem saying this is where I got it, this is how I got it, and this is why I feel it works for that. Like,
You just have to be careful with the words you use with the
Sure.
appraiser.
yeah, absolutely.
So I always send them the comps, and
Yeah.
luckily I haven't had anybody, that was really mean and didn't want them.
I've never had every appraiser who's ever emailed me has always asked, send me whatever information you want. Send me comps, send me improvements, send me information, because I don't think at the end of the day, I don't think they want to nix the deal. I don't think they want to be the reason why someone's not getting their house. Like I don't think they don't want to be that reason. Obviously they have to do their job and protect the lender, but it's it's a fine line we walk, but I would argue that it's our job to do so. I mean, to walk that line and try to influence the best way we can without suggesting like, hey, you better get this price because of X, Y, Z, like, or we're gonna file a complaint or something like that. Like I get that, but I don't feel like I've ever crossed that line of, I'm very like the conversation that I have is less. I show up, I open the door, provide the comps, tell them this is anything pertinent that I feel, and then I leave. Say, all right, I'll leave you to your job. Let me know if you have any questions. That's it. They appreciate the effort, because making an appointment to just meet them when I don't need to be there, they can access the property. They have access, especially on these, it's vacant. They don't need me there. They can go whenever they want. I just like to do it for me. I feel like it's part of my gig. So price per square foot. Back to that, like when you look at these properties and you're thinking, oh my gosh, like this So funny fact about this property is I told my investor flat out, like, this is not a $300,000 neighborhood. We're never going to get over $300,000. You better not even think about pricing it that way. Well, we got multiple offers. We kept it under 300, 229.5, and then the appraisal comes back. And the buyer shared it with me, so I had to share it with the seller. And it appraised at $314,000. And I asked him flat out, I said, do you think if we had put it on the market for that price, do you think we would have sold it for that price? And he looked at me and said, no, not in a million years. I said, exactly my point. How in the world would I have guessed it was going to go 15 grand over?
If you had a bidding war.
No.
No?
2 offers, both of them,
Wow.
both of them at list, both of them asking for 3% concessions, same offer. Not a bidding war. No one pushed it up. No one even thought to push it up because we all thought the same thing. Everybody who called me was like, oh man, this is right at the top of the comps. Do you think it'll appraise? That was the question I got from every buyer's agent. And then this guy comes in and gives me $315,000, which I had 2 investors. One of them was my friend, and we've done a lot of deals together. The other one was his partner. And I said, have him call me if you want to talk to me about it. But I stand by where I listed it. Obviously, we sold it. You guys made money, but so $315,000. Now, the only thing I can think of is this had owned solar, small system, but it was enough for this house. And on his, I didn't see the actual appraisal. He didn't share with me. He just shared the number because they don't have to. It's their property. He just shared the number with me, and the only thing I can think of is they valued that system more than I did. That's the only thing I can think of, and they must have valued it extremely high, because I mean that property that we had sold a year and a half ago was 200 square feet larger, and we got 285. So 200 square feet smaller with owned solar got $30,000 more in 18 months. I don't, if you want to do the quick math on that, I mean, that's like, what, 10%? Over 10% appreciation? I mean, that's a lot. Yes, sir.
How does, with owned solar,
Yep.
I mean, those are sometimes drawn out payment plans.
Owned is different. I mean, I'm talking about strictly owned. There
So
is no
they
lease.
pay-
There's no
pay it
Tesla.
off.
It's
They
just
pay it off.
it's just like the AC unit. It comes with property.
Okay.
And it's not. I mean, owned. If you could find one of those houses out there, buy it. That's what I bought, and
Yeah.
my bill is zero. Yeah, it's
And
great.
so how do you value that when you're listing a property?
It's subjective. It depends on kilowatt size. It depends. Like the only way they value it is 30. Like so, mine's 13 kilowatts. They valued it at 12 grand. I guess a loose is $800 to $1,000 per kilowatt. I mean, I guess if you want to use that, that could be a good baseline, but only if it's owned. If it's leased, it has zero value and it might even be negative. So, so just consider that when you guys are looking at properties like that. It may be green and it may actually lower your bills, but it's not worth anything in the eyes of the lender or the appraiser, because to them it's just a liability.
On the lease.
It's a liability on the lease. So back to this specific property. So we got it for, it was a bidding war. We got it for $207,500. We put like 35 or 40 grand into it, and we got, so it sold for, what did that sell for? It sold for $239 a square foot, which for that area is pretty high. I mean, we were pushing. So $239 a square foot, which, I mean, the range was probably $215 to like $240 was the best. I thought if everything worked out, we had the nicest property on the street, there was nothing else available, maybe we got $240 a square foot. Well, we got it. And then the appraiser came in and threw another monkey wrench and said, no, it's worth more than that, it's worth $315, which, I mean, even if you look today, there's nothing that size is even listed over $300,000. So I don't know where the guy got it. And that's just to illustrate my point. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Like, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. So all you can do is the best you can do is to pull these areas. So how do you comp? You pull an area, and then you pull that house, and you pull the streets. And so I start with price per square foot. What is it? Price per square foot? Just basic stuff. Price per square foot is where I start. And then I look, okay, what has sold in the last 6 months? Because you have to, because that's how they do it. So what is sold? Then you start looking, okay, well this house, so number 4 is pretty close. But it's sold for $152, so what do you do with that? Like, I throw that straight out, because I can't use it. Like, there's nothing, so I take that out. Okay, that guy's gone. So, 1233 East El Camino, number 2, is across 12th Street, which 12th Street's not a major street, but it gets a little dicey trying to go across out of neighborhoods. And the only reason is because if you're not a local expert, if you don't know that area super well, that might be a major street, and it might be a delineation point in value, and it happens all the time in different neighborhoods. Like in 85254, there's a bunch of streets that once you cross them, like the value just doesn't torpedo down, but it starts going down, and then even across Tatum, you're in 85254 to 85302 or 85032. Look at those two. I mean, you're within 100 feet of each other. Look at the value; it's markedly different. And the only reason that is because the codes and that big street cut across, and that's the delineation point. So I used it because 12th Street's not super busy, and I thought, okay, well, we'll keep that one in.
So what if you remodel your house and you can't find that similar property in your neighborhood? How far do you go out to find that similar property?
I've gone out to about a mile.
Yeah.
But you gotta be real careful with that, because then you're expecting and relying on an appraiser to do so, and they might not. They just.
But would you jump into another community? Let's say you had a remodel in the Biltmore.
Mm-hmm.
Would you jump 32nd Street and get into Lower Arcadia to get that comp? Like if it was just like, let's say, a quarter mile into Arcadia?
If necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, if necessary, but then you have to do a value adjustment. You have to know.
Based on what?
Based on how
What
nice
if the
that
house
property
is the same? The house, like
well, the house could be the same,
farmhouse.
but the neighborhood and you have to look, because then if I'm going into different neighborhoods, I have to look at that neighborhood specifically, what things are selling for, what price per square foot they're getting, how nice they are comparatively to my neighborhood, because it could be different. And that's where it gets a little dicey when you try to do that, because you're relying on basically people. You're expecting someone to pay the same for a different neighborhood. And sometimes you can do it. Sometimes if it's pretty much the same, but you're just going across the street.
Yeah, I'm not saying like going from Biltmore to Arcadia proper. I'm
Sure.
saying like
No, you can totally do it, but
Yeah.
again, I've done it. I've done different. Condos. I've done different separate communities. Like you go to a different because you just don't. If you just don't have anything, the appraiser has to do something too. They have to. So they're going to do. If there's nothing that's sold in the community in the last 6 months or even a year, like I've sold. I call them trailblazers. Like those are trailblaze plays because you don't have any real reason to say that you're going to get that number, but everything around that community is selling for a certain price. So just because nothing has sold in there doesn't mean the value is depressed. It means nothing's been listed. So you almost have to, and then you have to rely on an appraiser to do their job and understand. Like, what are they going to pull? If something's like we did a community on 11th Street, it was the first one. Nothing had sold in there in 2 years. And this was in 2015. So what happened in 2013? Like where were values in 2013 versus 2015? It was completely different. So the appraiser he literally can't use anything in that community. He has to go find something. So if there's nothing that's sold, if the next comp is 500 square feet less than yours, he's not going to do a value adjustment. That's too far. Like there's no way because appraiser, like what do you guys see on appraisers? What do they give you the price per square foot? Is it the retail price? It's not even near the retail price. It's $50 to $80. That's their value adjustment. It's crazy. So yes.
Where you have marked criteria for comparison, you didn't put in square footage or anything. You just pulled that one address and it automatically does that for you.
Well, it's however you want to do it.
But you're just starting with
Yeah.
the neighborhood, so you don't go into square footage.
Not
or
yet.
age. Okay, so
Not
you
yet.
do this first.
Because if you look at the neighborhood, everything's like
okay.
darn near-
You've got plenty there.
darn near the same. Yes, sir.
So to that point, like you're not using MLS per se as much as using tax or the monsoon.
I use monsoon just to get an idea of the neighborhood because generally the appraiser is not going to use off-market sales. They're only going to use MLS numbers.
Oh, that was going to be my next question. So if you find a sale,
Which I don't understand why that is either, but that's what they do.
So you find the sales that are like non-MLS sales,
And I usually strike them out.
Really?
Mhm.
So they give us no credit or
No real-
no benefit.
That'll be the last resort.
I've actually had some that would surprisingly that was a good number to use. You
Yeah.
think like, well, I probably want to throw it out anyway.
Well, I've done the same thing. I always include it, but they don't have. I don't know why. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they don't know the motivation of the sale. They don't know what it was marketed for. They don't know if it was a brother, sister, mother who bought it.
Okay, so they think it's less than like I just showed
Then-
a arm's length transaction.
Yeah,
or something of that
they don't
nature.
know who sold it, how it was sold, if it was reverted
Distressed
back,
or-
distressed. They just,
Got it.
in my experience, if they have MLS, they're going to use that first. They're going to go there first.
So again, you're seeing it this way.
Mhm.
The benefit that you get out of going this route first is just seeing the activity throughout.
I just want to see if things are selling. Like if there's not a lot for sale and not a lot sold, then I know it's going to be a tougher job on my end on the other side of the deal. Or if I'm listing a property, it's going to be tougher for me to justify why I'm listing it where I'm listing it if there's no activity in the neighborhood. There's a fine line between no activity and 6 months past because all of us on the buyer side, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get the best deal for our client, right? So we're going to look, okay, well, hey, you don't have any reason to sell it for that price.
Well, maybe I'm not understanding. Why don't you just go to MLS and look at those deals?
Well, this is just for me to look at general market, just to see if I want to even pursue it further.
Okay.
So this is where I start. I start here. If I see there's value in the neighborhood, then I'm like, okay, let's go see. Then I can come back to the MLS, and I can do a quick search. So see that 17,345. That's including contracts and UCB. So if I took just active. That's everywhere in Maricopa County, including condos, including trailers, including
Type in
everything.
single family, see what that pulls.
I think it's like 9,000, something like that. Oh, 10,000. So not terrible. So if I go back to that area now,
So it's just kind of like your sniff test, doing it through the months.
yeah, I mean, if you're when I get a listing, or if someone calls me and say, hey, I want to sell my house, and the first thing I do is they give me the address, so I look it up on Monster. That's the first thing I do, just to see, because they have an idea what they want to sell it for, or Zillow said this, or something said that, or maybe it was me, maybe my home bot said something, maybe that was the problem.
Oh, that was wrong.
Yeah, so maybe it was me. So the first thing I do is I go here. I'm like, okay, like, is that in the ballpark? Like, can we even, like, should we even entertain this at this point? And, so I don't want to go across Northern. Where's 12th Street? So it's this area right here. So even now, I mean, there's just nothing for sale. So now I'll go back through. And obviously these are actives. But now I'll go back through and look. And I can see that people have definitely used my comp to try to get value. But even this one's 1,647 square feet, and they're only at $299. Mine was 1,200 square feet, and we got $299. Same thing on this one, 1,700 square feet, $299. So if you rewind it back to March when we got this under contract and we were thinking we got $299. If I showed anybody this, they would think we were crazy. Like, there's no way you're going to get it, and that's what a bunch of different private money guys said. Like, there's no way. Like, that's not the value. Not the value for that neighborhood. Not the value for that property.
Just sometimes what I have a problem with is in an area where they're custom homes and they're all approximately the same lot size. How do you really look at that? I mean, you have the square footage, but they're all different. The homes are all
Lot
different.
size?
The lot size are about the same, but the homes are all different.
So that's super tough to sell to comp a custom home. What you have to do there is you have to get a baseline for what others have sold for, and then you have to look at finish. Features are huge. Like, square footage is not as big, but you need to find leverage points in that house to price it against other houses. Like, does it have the same flooring? Does it have the same backyard? Does it have the same appliances? Does it have the same, like, it's a little harder, a little bit more in depth, because it's not so much about what others have sold for as it is about what that would bring on the market, like the demand for it. I mean, it could be the same square footage house, but if it's a style that's 20 years ago, it's not going to sell for the one that's current. So it's just, to me, once you get into custom areas, you gotta really dial in, like, the actual fit and finish of the house. Like, that's not so important in sub 500. Like, it matters a little bit. It matters less now because I'm seeing, I don't know if you guys are seeing, like, things that close, and I just don't even understand what people are paying for. It's crazy. I mean, it's good for us as an industry, but some of the stuff I'm watching, some of the stuff my investor says, oh, we need that $50,000 less, goes for retail, and you're like, okay, didn't expect that to happen. But it's not so important today as it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. Is anybody driving a black Chevy Traverse that's in covered parking? If it's a reserved spot, you'll have to move. They're gonna call the police and tow truck.
Oh.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
So that's a little bit more of a, you have to, I mean, luxury is more of a niche, like, where you have to feel and know that specific community. It's hyper-local. What sells in Desert Mountain might not sell on Camelback Mountain for the same price, for the same design, for the same anything. So that one's a little bit more of a
Pre-listing appraisal.
yes. I would definitely always advise that. Just to give you a good baseline. Like,
We bought in there and they didn't come in the house for the appraisal. In fact, they waived the appraisal.
The lender did. Yeah, they
I don't know why.
They do that.
But we were on the lower end,
Well, I refi. So I choose separate. I have my personal property, and then I have an investment property. I refi at the same time. My personal property waive the appraisal. And my personal property, I felt was I was trying to do the same thing, 25% LTV. I thought that was way more of a stretch than my investment property. Investment property, they appraised it, came in low. Personal property, they waived it. Two separate lenders. I don't know why. No, you didn't. I just signed a waiver. I asked, and he said, well, underwriting triggered it, that we could waive the appraisal. I'm like just underwriting? He's like, yeah. Okay.
No one
None that I would know, because I'm not inside the underwriter's office, and seeing what they're seeing. But like mine was like I was gonna struggle. Like I was struggling to get that 25% on my house. Like struggling, like to find it. I couldn't find it, and they waived it. Because I even asked, he's like, hey, I'm gonna send you the appraisal waiver. And I said, dude, like I'm not doing the refi unless I get 25%, like because it doesn't make sense. He's like, no, we got it. I'm like, what are you talking about? Okay. Like, I'm not going to ask too many questions, I guess. I'll just sign the appraisal waiver. So, and then the other one where we thought, oh, this is a slam dunk. Like, values have gone up. Nope. Absolutely not. So it's just a very interesting part of our job that, you wouldn't think about would be too hard, but you just don't know. And that's the problem, again, like my problem with appraisers. Like I know a lot of appraisers are good guys, but like when we talk, they're very conservative in their valuation. So like I'll come back, because I'll ask them like on some of these stuff, I'll say, hey, what do you think? What do you think we can get for it? And he tells me, and I go back to him when we're done. Well, guess what we got for it? And I show them.
And they see the contract. I mean, that's what I don't get. Why, someone's willing to pay it. I don't know why. Like you said, someone will come in 5,000 under.
For especially on like a $500,000 home, like I answer the broker line. I've got a lot of calls like, hey, the appraisal came in low, like a couple $1,000. Like how in the world could you tell me that this property is 478 but is only worth 470? Like how are you that precise? Like there's no way you can be that precise.
You know what? I think sometimes they miss the counter offers. When
Oh,
you've gone back
100%.
and forth, and they give the price that's on the contract
Yeah, that's
at
happened.
400, and maybe you've had counters and you're at 403, because that's happened.
Well, they'll take into account. They shouldn't, but they do. I know they do. They take into account concessions, like what you give up, because that affects the net. But I don't know. I mean, I don't. There's no way that you could explain to me that you could be that precise that it's worth $2,000 less than this one.
And their training's all different.
That's what I mean. There's no rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're all
if we could have the whole everybody could be an appraiser in here, and I could ask everybody the same exact question and get a different answer. I might get around the same answer, but it won't be the same. Like it won't be the same, and that's why when I say comping's a art, you have to dive into the specific community you're trying to comp and get a feel for what's going on in the community. And the only way to do it is to look. You look at your price per square foot first. Does it have a pool? Absolutely cannot comp single level to 2-story. It just doesn't work. The values are, depending on where you're at, could be 30% different. It just depends, so you can't do that either. So what do? You take your price per square foot, you take your amenities as long as they match or are pretty close. So if something has 3 bedrooms and a den and one has 4 bedrooms, like what do you do there? Like for me, that's always a wash. That's the same property to me. Because I could make it a bedroom if I wanted to, or I could add a window, or I could do whatever I needed to do as long as the square footage is similar, the bedrooms, the number of rooms is similar. Does it have the same style of kitchen? Like galley versus open versus eat-in versus, dining in a great room versus, all those things. And you're looking at all this information and taking it all into account, and then a pool versus not a pool. To me, I don't think that's like the biggest deal in the world, because I can just take some information off. Like I would say, I just baseline. I always say like $10,000, $10,000 to $15,000. So that's the dollar amount. But the other thing you gotta look at too is there's the dollar amount of things, and then there's the desirability of things, and those are not the same. Those will never be the same. So there's the hard numbers of the pool's worth $10,000 versus the desirability of, is someone going to want to buy this place without a pool? And like how do you weigh that? Like, it just depends on the neighborhood. It depends on the time.
What about basement homes? Do you strictly compare basement homes with basement homes?
Boy, that's such a tough one because no appraiser's going to appraise that the same. Like for me, if it's square footage and it's livable, you can't count the basement the same as a second story. Like I don't know why, but it's just the value is not across the board. It's not the same. It won't appraise the same. It'll be at a discount. That square footage on a basement will be at a discount. And why that is, I mean, I don't know. I don't know 100% why. If you ask an appraiser, he would tell you that it's because it's under the ground. Maybe the ceilings aren't as high. Maybe I don't know. But the square footage is definitely. If you have two homes sitting next to each other, one's a basement, one's a two-story. The two-story would probably be valued more.
Okay.
Even though they're both multi-level, square footage could be the same. The fit and finish could be the same. Across the board, that's what I've seen over and over again, is that basement homes are just not valued the same. And I don't have a real good reason for that, other than that's what I've seen over and over again by appraisers. So basically, I've given you a ton of information as to why this is hard. Does anybody have any questions as to how you should start, streamline the process, in easy? Because this is hard for sure, but there's a couple, like Monsoon can give you a quick value, RPR can give you a quick value, and RPR is pretty good at giving you a decent starting point for any kind of value that you want. I don't know if anybody has used RPR.
Do you use the CMA?
I don't. I've never really got into that. I usually use Monsoon and then RPR, and then when I get closer to deciding, I just draw a square and I start selecting pendings and close and stuff like that.
Do you ever use book and maps to kind of differentiate at all, or comps, you know?
I just don't want to make the difference.
So RPR gave me, so the list, they're saying the list price is $279. The RVM, which is their number, is $262, and they're giving you a range here. They're giving you a range and a confidence. So, and this is the reason why I prefer RPR to most other software, is because of the confidence. And the confidence comes from how many direct comps do they have, like how close they are, when did they sell, size. So it's pretty. I mean, for me, it's been fairly accurate. Like at least the range part of it, not necessarily like the exact number they give, because it could be different, but the range of it is pretty accurate. It's pretty. If I was going to start anywhere when I got a listing, I would look this up first, because it gives you, it's a pretty good baseline. Now you got to remember, this is taking into account nothing about the inside. There's not a single thing they don't know what it looks like. They don't know you remodeled it. They don't know what your floors are. They have no idea. This is just a computer model. It's more accurate than Zillow. It's more accurate than Redfin. It's more I don't know why it is, but their model seems to be more accurate, and it seems to follow the market better than the other systems do. So this is a good starting point. And you can, they have some kooky stuff in here sometimes. Like they say they'll say it's 3 bathrooms when it's 2, or it's 5 bedrooms when it's 4, but you can change all that information if you wanted to. Now RPR is a completely separate class, but for our purposes, it'd be a good way to start. It'd be a good place to start this process, because it tells you everything about it, and then it gives you so much information. But you could change a bunch of stuff. So if you know that how is the local market, is it better than anywhere else, you can change it. You can say it's hot, and then it gives you more money. And associate something with that. How's the home? Is it nice? Is it not so nice? No. So it's stuff that you can change once you go to the property and see the property. That's why nothing's ever gonna, we have these computer simulations and all these things, but nothing's ever gonna replace an agent or an appraiser or someone going to the property to see it, because you can't just apply a value across the board, because every property is unique. Every property has its challenges. Every property has features that another property might not have. So it's a good way to start. This is only a starting point to get you to the property, to get you to pull the comps directly from the MLS. That's the only and best way that I know how to do it, is to pull the comps. Like you draw, like what I did. I drew I drew a map, and I didn't go out a mile, I went a half mile at best. And I drew, and that's basically what things are comping for. And I have stopped, obviously, at this mountain because mountain properties are worth more than single family that are flat. And if I saw, let's see, I could change. So that's where I start. I say, okay, what's active? And then I say, okay, what's under contract? And it changes. So these guys right here, 300,000, 1,200 square feet, pretty close to what I did. This is a different neighborhood. That's different neighborhood, different style, different year build. That's another big thing. You got to stick pretty close to the year build. Like you can go plus or minus maybe 5 or 10 years, but if you start getting more than 20 years, it's not going to work. They won't include it unless you're so close that it has to be included. Like unless you're in a new build community and the next community over is older, like maybe they'll include it, but still probably won't. They'll still look for stuff that's year built close to what you have. So I see, even this one's got to be up on the mountain or something. Jeez. So they're getting almost $300. They're getting like Scottsdale numbers for their property, which is impressive. And then these guys are 3-1, selling for way less because it has 1 bathroom versus a 2-bathroom, right? Now, what would an appraiser value that at? A bathroom versus not having a bathroom, maybe like an actual adjustment of 5 or 10 grand. But what's it worth desirability wise? Like how many people are going to want to buy that house versus a 2-bathroom house? That's why I say you can't, like the desirability versus what they're actually going to give you value wise is 2 different things. It's never the same, it never adds up because like I said, they'll give you $80 a square foot on like if I have a property that's 2,200 square feet that I'm using as a comp and my property is 2,000 square feet, they're going to adjust it down by some mathematical arbitrary number that I don't know where they get it from, like a 50, in my experience it's $50 to $100. Now that's a huge range that could affect the appraisal hugely, but I don't know, it depends on the neighborhood, it depends like so many different laundry list of reasons why they did that, but it's never, the bottom line is if I'm selling that house at $180 a square foot, they're not giving me $180 a square foot adjustment. They're going to give you something smaller than that, like maybe $80 a square foot. And that's up or down. Like if my house is bigger, they're not going to give me the $180 a square foot. They're going to give me $80 a square foot. And go figure as to why that would be. But when if you're comping a property and all you have is a smaller one, like you can't go price per square foot to price per square foot because it never. If you look at closed comps, it never equates. It's not the same. Like the value of your bigger house the smaller you get, the higher price per square foot it's going to be. So you go higher, it doesn't equate. Like naturally, you would think that they're going to give you the same number. They won't. It just doesn't happen. And again, I guess that's because bigger properties can't be valued the same as smaller properties. You're paying for a baseline of entry into a neighborhood that if it's 1,000 square feet, it is what it is, and 1,500 square feet, it's not going to be the same as 1,000 square feet. But you would have to look at that specific neighborhood to figure out what the bigger ones are selling for versus yours because the appraiser's going to adjust it.
You go 10%?
I try to stick to like it depends on the square footage. If it's 250 and under, I'll give myself like 30 grand value, depending because I know my property's going to be nicer, or if my property's nicer, I usually do like 30.
No, I mean on square footage.
Like 10% over? Yeah, 10%.
And under, right?
10% up, plus or minus. Yeah. Same thing on the lot, 10% plus or minus. And you can set all those up here on the criteria for comparison. You can change that to whatever. Sometimes if you're in an older neighborhood, sometimes you have to go 20%, or sometimes you have to ignore it because you're not going to get any comps. It's per property. That's why comping these older homes and older neighborhoods in Arcadia is very tough because you could have the same property next to each other and the lot could be smaller, it could be bigger, it could be whatever it is. They didn't really make everything the same when they did some of these. Like the newer tract homes is super, those are a lot easier to comp because you know what it's going to be. All the lots are the same, uniform. Uniformity helps with comping, and helps with appraisals because they're going to know. It's where you get these very slight variations in size, and is where you have to use your best guess is the only way I can put it. It's going to be your best guess as to what you think it's going to. So you could do plus or minus. I safely 10%. I would say safely on lot size 10%. If you don't have a pool, then I wouldn't price a home with a pool. If you don't have it, if you're a single story, then don't look for 2 stories. If you're a 2-story, don't even consider using a single story as a comp unless you absolutely have nothing else to pull, because they won't. They would rather find a 2-story in a separate neighborhood than comp a single story. Like that's been my experience with it. They'll go out to find something that's like for like more than they'll do a single story, just because it's so different. The values are so different. We got about 6 minutes left. I'm open for questions. Anybody have questions? Yes.
There's something I'm wondering about what you said earlier, is that if you get an appraisal on a house, as long as it's conventional or whatever, you do not have to reveal it. So that's not considered a material fact or anything when you're selling it?
It's not a material fact.
Okay.
Because it's only an opinion on that specific day and time.
Okay.
What do you usually, percentage-wise, discount for a busy street?
Depends on the street, depends on how busy, it depends on where you're at in the community. If you're closer to the intersection, probably 15%. If you're not, if you're just in the middle and it's not super busy, I would say the lowest I've seen is about 8%. And it could go up from there, it just depends on where you're at. Like I sold my house, my first house in 2014, I backed up to a busy street. I backed up to Lake Pleasant Parkway. So I bought in 2014, I sold in 2018. So since 2018, Meritage has put in about, 5,000 houses. So now Lake Pleasant Parkway is twice as busy as it was when I sold. So I would say the adjustment has changed because it's way busier than it was before. So it's not going to be the same every single time. Like I got lucky, I sold before they had finished all the houses. But the person who bought it for me is probably not going to be as lucky because now it's congested every day because there's so many new builds. And I think Toll Brothers just started a new community right there. And that's like the main thoroughfare through, if you're coming from Lake Pleasant to get to the 101, that's the way you're going. And when I first got there, it wasn't busy at all. There was no traffic. And every year it got progressively busier and busier and busier until I sold. And now I can't even imagine what it would be. It's probably super loud.
So it's fronting versus backing? Do you think if you're fronting a busy street versus backing, same percentage?
No, I think fronting's a little bit worse. It's a little bit worse, a little bit less value. And it depends on if you have that barrier street versus not having the barrier street. If you're right on, like some of these homes, if you're right on Cactus down here on 85th, that's going to be different than if you back to Cactus. Because you got to think about access, getting in and out, lights into your rooms, like all kinds of stuff like that. It's a little bit less valuable for sure. Anybody else have anything? Questions? Comments, concerns?
Is there a difference in value for shutters versus, these vinyl mini blinds?
Like wood like
yeah,
plantation
like
shutters?
a plantation wood shutter.
Very small. I've only seen, appraisers. I've never actually seen that on an adjustment. They usually just account it towards quality of the home, and so I don't know the exact value, but it's not a line item, that's for sure. It's just this house versus that house. This one's a little bit nicer, so here's the adjustment. I mean, but that goes back to desirability versus, quantifiable number. Just that's what it goes back to. It's just not the same. It's not the same thing.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So on your remodel, if you have the same remodel, if you have the same year remodel, and one's the whites and the grays and the brown, and then the other one's more of the Mediterranean Tuscany, what do you think about that? Do you think about what's desirable per the buyer?
Yeah. Most of these remodels, like if I showed my wife, she wouldn't want to live there. But I'm not designing it to live there. I'm designing it for what's selling.
Yeah.
So it's just personal taste, and until that stops moving, then I'll do something different. But that's what
But do you think an appraiser will look at differently?
An appraiser won't. It'll just be
what finish wise, like color and stuff like that.
It'll just be like if everything's brand new, it's new flooring, and you have white quartz here, and you have a traditional style of granite over here. Like there's not going to be an adjustment for it. It'll be the desirability of what contract you got, and that'll be just up to the buyer, particular buyer.
Okay.
I've never seen them adjust a remodel differently. Like I've had them make comments to me that I like this one better.
Right, you sit on the market longer.
Yeah. Like I like your remodel better than that one, but he does it like you would think that would equate to a value adjustment. It doesn't.
What about craftsmanship? There's a lot of shoddy flips out there.
I've never seen that. Like I've never heard or seen of an appraiser make note of it, unless something had to be redone, unless it was like a FHA and the paint was peeling, or they looked up and they saw.
No, I'm just saying if there was like two shoddy flips down the street and you did yours killer, right? And the appraiser's just looking at pictures online. How's he gonna tell like what?
He's not.
You know.
He's not. So you either have to bring it to his attention.
Yeah.
Bring it to his attention, like this versus this, or sometimes if they both sold or they're under contract or I'm under contract, I'll show them days on market. You know, like mine sold in 6 days, they're sold in like 47 days. There had to be a reason.
Yeah.
You know, it's just little things that you can try to, I guess, not influence him, but show him the data as to why yours is a little bit better than the other. I mean, it's, like I said, it's a super fine line between influencing an appraiser and showing him why. And where that line is, like, I don't know.
Just want to know your opinion, basically.
What about like the neighborhood? You know, the street is overall okay, but next door is like a junkyard.
A value adjustment? I've never seen a line item for neighbor sucking.
Okay.
Never seen it. Like, but that won't be. You won't have that problem on the appraisal because your value of the contract will be lower. So that it'll already be taken into account when you have a crappy neighborhood. It'll be taken into account on your contract price versus the appraiser adjusting for it. They usually don't. It's usually that specific property, and they'll take into account the general desirability of the overall neighborhood, not your specific neighborhood. So like I said, it's a very non-specific thing, and that's why appraisers and real estate agents have a very contentious, symbiotic relationship. They need us, we need them, but we don't like it. Anybody else? Anything else? No? All right. That's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.